Have you ever listened to doctors talk and felt like you needed a secret decoder ring? Well, you're not wrong. There is a kind of secret language in medicine, a whole system designed to bring order to thousands of super complex actions. And today, we're gonna crack that code. I mean, think about it. What is the real difference between a lumpectomy and a mastectomy? They both involve the breast, right? Or a skin graft and a hernia mesh. You're adding something in both cases. But the difference between them is absolutely fundamental. And once you see the pattern, you'll start seeing it everywhere.
And this is it. This is the key that unlocks the whole thing. The secret isn't about memorizing a ton of complicated procedure names. It's about asking one simple question. What's the goal? What's the objective? The moment you know the why, the what just snaps into focus.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with taking things out. Then we'll get into cutting and moving things around. After that, we'll look at altering pathways, using devices, and we'll wrap up with the final touches like repairs. Let's do this. All right, let's start with the most intuitive group of all. These are all the procedures where the main goal, the whole point, is just to remove something from the body. Simple as that.
First up is excision. And the magic word here, the one you got to remember, is portion. Think about it like a tub of ice cream. An excision is when the surgeon just scoops out one part, like a single tumor. A breast lumpectomy, that's a perfect example. They're only taking a portion of the tissue.
Now, the direct counterpart to excision is resection. In this case, the objective isn't to take a piece, it's to take all of it. So, back to our ice cream. A resection isn't just one scoop. It's taking the entire tub. A total mastectomy, where the entire breast is removed, that's a classic resection. And when you see them side by side like this, it just clicks, doesn't it? Excision is partial, resection is total. A partial nephrectomy is an excision of the kidney, a total one is a resection. It always comes back to that objective. Are we taking some or are we taking it all?
Of course, there are other ways to get the job done. Detachment is a very specific one. It's for cutting off an extremity, like an amputation. Destruction uses energy, maybe a laser, to basically vaporize tissue without cutting it out. And extraction is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're pulling something out by force, like a tooth extraction.
Okay, let's move on to our next big category. We're shifting away from just removing things to procedures that are all about changing the structure, the position, or the relationship between different parts of the body. Here is another one of those pairs that sounds similar but is totally different. A division is simply cutting into a body part. Think of an osteotomy, where a bone is cut so it can be realigned. But a release, totally different objective. The goal there is to freeze something from a constraint. Like with carpal tunnel release, the surgeon cuts a ligament around the nerve to get rid of that pressure. See the difference? And there are all kinds of ways to move things around. Reattachment is pretty straightforward, putting a severed part back on. Reposition is when you move something that's been knocked out of place, like a broken bone, back where it's supposed to be. Transfer is moving a part to a new spot to do a new job. But now, pay attention to this last one, transplantation. The absolute crucial point here is that the part being put in is a living part from another person. Okay, next up, let's talk about the body's plumbing. There's a whole set of procedures designed to change the internal pathways, all those tubes and tunnels that carry blood, air, you name it. The most famous of these, of course, is the bypass. The objective is really simple. If there's a block road, you create a detour. A coronary artery bypass is the perfect example. Surgeons create a brand new route for blood to get around a blocked artery and reach the heart. And hey, look at this. Just like before, we have another total versus partial situation. An occlusion means you completely close off a tube, like in a tubal ligation. A restriction, though, only partially closes it. It just narrows the passage, like a gastric band. Same kind of action, but a totally different objective. All right, let's talk about hardware. There's an entire category of these medical verbs that isn't about what you do to the body, but about how surgeons work with a medical device. You can almost think of this as a little story, the life of a device inside the body. It starts with insertion, putting a new device in. Maybe later, if something's not quite right, a surgeon does a revision. They just correct it or adjust it. And finally, when it's time for it to go, that's removal.
Now, this is a really cool one. What's the difference between replacing something and just helping it out? A replacement does exactly what you think. A device, like an artificial hip, literally takes the place of a body part. But a supplement doesn't replace anything. It's added to reinforce or augment an existing body part, like the mesh used to make a hernia repair stronger. It's a helper.
We are in the home stretch now. This last group covers some of the most common and some of the most specialized procedures that kind of act as the finishing touches in surgery. So, repair is basically the default fix-it operation. The objective is just to put a body part back to its normal state as much as you can. The most common example in the world? Getting stitches for a cut. That's a repair, plain and simple.
Now, fusion is a fascinating one because its objective is a little counterintuitive. When you fuse a joint, like in the spine or an ankle, the whole point is actually to make it stop moving. By joining the bones together, you get rid of painful movement and create some serious stability.
And this brings us right back to where we started, to our central theme. This quote, it's from an official medical coding guide. It says everything. The name of the procedure can be tricky, but the single most important step is always to figure out the why. What was the surgeon actually trying to accomplish?
And this just illustrates that point perfectly. Let's take that hernia repair. If the surgeon's objective is simply to stitch the muscle tissue back together, that's a repair. But if the goal is to reinforce that weak area with a piece of mesh, it's not a repair anymore. It's a supplement. Same problem, two different objectives, two completely different classifications.
And just like that, by focusing on the objective, we have cracked the code. We didn't have to memorize some long, boring list. We just understood the core logic behind all 31 of these distinct medical verbs. We took what could be an overwhelming list and turned it into a simple, manageable set of ideas. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you're reading a medical chart or you hear a doctor describing a procedure, you now have the master key. Instead of getting tangled up in all the terminology, what's the first, most important question you'll know to ask?